Commander Zethkar stood before the great star map in the Vorthok Empire's central war room. His scaled hands traced across planets that glowed like jewels in the darkness. Each world represented another victory for his people. Each conquest had taken time, but time was something the Vorthok had plenty of. At 5,000 years old, Zethkar was still considered young by his people's standards. His grandfather had lived for 12,000 years before choosing to pass into the final sleep. His great-grandfather had seen the first world's fall to Vorthok, might nearly 20,000 years ago. The war room buzzed with quiet activity. Other commanders moved between displays, showing troop movements and supply lines that stretched across multiple star systems. These were not rushed plans made in haste. Every detail had been carefully thought out over decades. Every strategy had been tested and refined through centuries of careful planning. Commander called Subleader Vishtak from across the room. "We have new intelligence reports from the Outer Rim." Zethkar turned slowly. His people never rushed. There was no need to hurry when you lived for thousands of years. He walked to where Vishtak waited by a smaller display screen. The younger officer was only 3,000 years old, still eager and sometimes too quick to act. "What do the scouts report?" Zethkar asked. "A new species, sir? They call themselves humans. They have established colonies on 17 worlds in the Spiral Arm sector." Zethkar looked at the data flowing across the screen. Population numbers, technology levels, military strength. All the usual information the Vorthok gathered before beginning a new conquest. He had seen these reports thousands of times before. For hundreds of different species, how long do they live? This was always Zethkar's first question. The lifespan of a species told him everything he needed to know about how long the war would take. Vishtak's throat sacs inflated with what? The Vorthok considered laughter. "You will find this amusing, Commander. They live for less than 100 years. Zethkar paused. He had conquered species that lived for 500 years. Some had lasted for 800. The longest-lived opponents had managed nearly 1,500 years per individual. But less than 100? This was almost too easy.
"Are you certain
of these numbers?" "Yes, sir. Our deep scouts observed their colonies for 50 years, watched entire generations grow old and die. Some humans live for only 60 or 70 years. Their leaders rarely see more than 90 years. Around the war room, other commanders had stopped their work to listen. Word spread quickly among the Vorthok when new prey was discovered. Soon, dozens of ancient warriors gathered around the display. General Korthus approached the group. At 8,000 years old, he was the oldest active commander in the fleet. His scales had turned the deep purple color that marked true elders among the Vorthok. He had personally overseen the conquest of 43 worlds. "Show me there." "Military capabilities," Korthus commanded. The display changed to show human ships and weapons. Ishthak pointed to different images as he spoke. "They have developed faster than light travel, but their technology is basic. Their largest ships carry perhaps 2,000 individuals. Their weapons use simple energy projection and kinetic force." "What about their ground forces, primitive but numerous?" "They rely on projectile weapons and basic energy shields. Their tactics appear chaotic and unrefined." Korthus studied the information for several minutes. His ancient mind processed the data with the careful thought that came from millennia of experience. Finally, he spoke. "How many humans exist in total?" "Approximately 40 billion across all their worlds, sir." "And their population growth?" "Rapid, sir. They reproduce quickly due to their short lifespans. New generations appear every 20 to 30 years. Korthus nodded slowly. "This will be a brief campaign, perhaps 200 years at most. Their short lives will work against them. By the time their children grow old enough to fight, we will have taken half their worlds. By the time their grandchildren mature, we will control their entire territory." The assembled commanders made sounds of agreement. This was how the Vorthok had always fought. It would begin with small attacks on outer colonies. It would destroy just enough to show their power, then wait. Let the short-lived species panic and exhaust themselves, preparing for battles that might not come for decades. While the humans worried and planned and died of old age, the Vorthok would slowly move their fleets into position. They would establish supply bases on empty worlds near human space. They would study human technology and tactics until they understood every weakness. when the Vorthok finally struck in force, their enemies would face warriors who had spent lifetimes preparing for this exact battle. The humans would find themselves fighting opponents who had centuries of experience and patience beyond their understanding. Begin standard preparation protocols, Korthus ordered. I want deep reconnaissance established within 50 years. Supply bases operational within 100 years. First assault waves ready within 150 years? To the humans, this would seem like an impossibly long time to prepare for war. Multiple human generations would live and die before the first real battle began. But to the Vorthok, this was normal timing. They had learned that patience always defeated haste. Zethkar looked once more at the star map. Soon, 17 new jewels would join the thousands already claimed for the Vorthok Empire. These humans might fight bravely, but they would fight with the desperate fury of creatures who knew their time was short. The Vorthok would fight with the calm certainty of those who had all the time in the universe. It had worked for 20,000 years. It would work again. Ambassador Sarah Chen stared at the massive alien ship that hung in space above Earth's moon. For 3 days, the vessel had remained perfectly still, like a dark mountain floating among the stars. No communication had come from the ship since. It first appeared and transmitted a single message in perfect English. We come to speak with your leaders. The emergency session of the United Earth Council had been running for 18 hours. Representatives from every human colony argued about how to respond to humanity's first contact with alien life. Some wanted to send weapons. Others demanded immediate evacuation of the outer colonies. Sarah had been chosen to lead the diplomatic team because she had spent her career dealing with impossible situations at 45 years old. Sarah was considered experienced by human standards. She had negotiated peace treaties and trade agreements across human space. But nothing had prepared her for this moment as she sat in the small shuttle approaching the alien vessel. Their ship is huge, said Captain Rodriguez from the pilot seat. It's easily 10 times the size of our largest military vessels. Sarah nodded, trying to stay calm. The alien ship looked like it had been carved from black stone. Strange symbols glowed along its surface in patterns that hurt to look at directly. No human technology could build something so massive and make it move through space. Are you sure they understood our message about meeting inside their ship? Asked Dr. Williams, the team's xenobiologist. They acknowledged our transmission, Sarah replied. They said they would receive us in what they called the speaking chamber. The shuttle docked with a soft bump. Sarah felt her heart racing as the airlock cycled open. The aliens had provided an atmosphere that humans could breathe, which seemed like a good sign. The corridor beyond was dimly lit and much larger than any human hallway. Everything seemed built for creatures much bigger than people. They walked for several minutes through passages that curved and twisted in ways that made no sense. Finally, they reached a vast circular room with a ceiling that disappeared into darkness above. In the center of the room stood 3 aliens. Sarah had seen the images transmitted by the first contact team, but seeing the Vorthok in person was different. They stood nearly 3 meters tall, with dark scaled skin and 4 arms. Their heads were elongated, with large eyes that seemed to see everything at once. When they moved, it was with slow, careful motions that reminded Sarah of very old people. Greetings, humans, said the center alien. His voice was deep and seemed to come from somewhere inside its chest. I am Commander Zethkar of the Vorthok Empire. These are my advisors, Subleader Vishthok and Strategic Planner Morvus. Sarah stepped forward and tried to keep her voice steady. I am Ambassador Sarah Chen, representing the United Earth Council and all human colonies. We welcome this first contact between our peoples. Commander Zethkar's large eyes studied her for a long moment. You are very young for a leader among your kind. I'm 45 years old. That's not particularly young for humans. 45 repeated the alien slowly, as if tasting the words. We have been monitoring your species for 50% of your years. We have observed many generations of your people in that time. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. You've been watching us for 50 years, of course? It is standard procedure when the Vorthok Empire encounters a new species. We study your capabilities, your technology, your social structures. Zethkar gestured with one of his forearms. We have learned much about humanity during this time. Dr. Williams stepped forward. May I ask how long your people typically live? The three aliens made a sound that might have been laughter. I myself have seen 5,000 years, Zethkar said. I am considered young among my people. Strategic. Planner Morvis has lived for 7,000 years. Some of our elders have seen 12,000 years pass. Sarah tried to hide her shock. These aliens had been alive since before human civilization began. Zethkar alone had lived 50 times. Longer than any human ever could. That must give you great wisdom, she said carefully. Indeed. We have learned patience above all things. Your species moves quickly, makes decisions in haste, changes course without careful thought. This is natural for creatures with such brief lives. Sarah sensed something threatening in the alien's tone. Commander, what exactly is the purpose of this meeting? Zethkar moved to a wall display that showed a map of human space. All 17 human colonies glowed as small dots scattered across several star systems. The Vorthok Empire has been expanding for 20,000 years. We have brought order and peace to hundreds of worlds. We offer the same to humanity. Kind of order? Sarah asked. Submission to Vorthok authority. Your worlds will become part of our empire. Your people will serve Vorthok interests. In return, we will protect you and guide your development. And if we refuse, the alien commanders exchanged glances. Strategic Planner Morvis spoke for the first time. Refusal is not wise. We have conquered species far more advanced than humanity, species that lived longer, fought harder, planned more carefully than you. How long would such a war take? Dr. Williams asked. For your people, perhaps 100 to 200 years. For us, it will be a brief conflict. We'll take your outer colonies first, then slowly advance toward your core worlds. We will give you time to see the futility of resistance. Sarah felt anger rising in her chest. You're talking about a war that would last longer than any human lifetime. You would fight our children and our children's children. Yes, it's Zethkar said simply, and their children as well, if necessary. We have time. You do not. Eventually, your people will grow tired of war. New generations will arise who do not remember why they fight. They will choose peace over pointless struggle. You've done this before, many times. Short-lived species always follow the same pattern. They fight fiercely at first, but they cannot maintain that fury across generations. They make peace when they realize they cannot outlast us. Captain Rodriguez had been quiet until now, but Sarah saw his hands clenched into fists. You're monsters, he said quietly. Morvis turned its large eyes toward him. We are practical. War is wasteful. It's better to surrender now and avoid unnecessary death. Sarah looked around the vast chamber and realized she was seeing the confidence of a species that had never lost. These aliens had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of conquest. They had defeated every enemy they had ever faced, using the same patient strategy. We need time to consider your offer, Sarah said. Of course. We will give you 10 of your years to decide. Use this time wisely. Study our fleet. Learn about our capabilities. Understand that resistance will only delay the inevitable. Human delegation returned to their shuttle. Sarah's mind raced. 10 years seemed like a long time to humans, but to these aliens, it was barely a moment. They were already thinking decades ahead, planning each move in a war that might last centuries. But Sarah had spent her career negotiating with people who thought they held all the advantages. She had learned that confidence could become weakness if the situation changed in unexpected ways. The aliens thought humanity's short lifespan was a weakness. Maybe they were right. But maybe they were about to learn something new about what desperate people could accomplish when they had nothing left to lose. General Marcus Torres watched the tactical display in the New Geneva Command Center as another human colony went dark. Kepler Station had fallen 3 hours ago. The Vorthok had taken it with the same slow, methodical approach they had used on the previous 4 colonies over the past 18 months. 25 years had passed since first contact. The Vorthok had kept their word about waiting 10 years, then began their conquest exactly on schedule. For 15 years now, they had been slowly taking human worlds at the edge of colonized space. "Sir, we're getting the final transmission from Kepler Station," reported Colonel Janet Price. At 38, she was young for such a high-ranking position. But the war had created many opportunities for rapid promotion. Marcus listened to the desperate final message from the doomed colony. The pattern was always the same. Vorthok would arrive with overwhelming force, demand surrender, then wait. If the humans refused, it would begin a careful bombardment that destroyed military targets while leaving the civilian population alive. Eventually, the colony would surrender to save lives. "How many evacuees made it out?" Marcus asked.
S.
"About 60% of the population, sir." "The evacuation ships are heading to Haven Colony," Marcus nodded grimly. This was the reality of fighting an enemy with unlimited time and patience. The Vorthok could afford to take colonies slowly because they knew humans could not abandon their people to die. Every battle became a choice between certain death and living under alien rule. The command center doors opened and Admiral Lisa Chang entered. At 59, she was one of the oldest active commanders in the human fleet. She had been a young captain during first contact and now led the entire human military effort. "Any word from the research teams?" Marcus asked. "Dr. Patel thinks he's found something," Admiral Chang replied. "He wants to brief us in person." They walked quickly through the corridors of the command center. Around them, officers and technicians worked at a pace that would have seemed frantic to alien observers. Humans had learned to live and work with urgent intensity since the war began. Dr. Raj Patel waited in conference. Room 7 with displays showing alien ship designs and battle recordings. At 41, he had spent half his adult life studying Vorthok technology and tactics. "Admiral General, I think I understand why we keep losing," Dr. Patel began, without waiting for them to sit down. "We've been fighting them like they're humans, with better technology, but they're not." "Explain," Admiral Chang said. "Watch this." Dr. Patel activated a recording from the battle at Ross Station 2 years ago. The Vorthok arrive, deploy their ships in formation, and begin bombardment. Now watch what happens when our fighters attack their left flank. On the screen, human. Ships dove toward the alien formation. The Vorthok responded by shifting their formation in a complex maneuver that perfectly countered the human attack. That response took them exactly 47 minutes to execute, Dr. Patel said. Now watch this recording from Kepler Station, where we used the exact same attack pattern. The second recording showed the same human tactic. This time the Vorthok response took only 12 minutes. "They're learning," General Torres said. "No, sir, they already knew. Look at this." Dr. Patel brought up another display. "I've analyzed every battle we've fought in the past 15 years. The Vorthok have used exactly 17 different tactical formations. 17 in 15 years of warfare." Admiral Chang studied the data. It seems like very few options for such a long war. Exactly. Now look at human tactical variations. In the same period, the display changed to show a complex web of different approaches. "We've used over 300 different formations, attack patterns, and strategies. We're more creative," General Torres said. "We're more desperate," Dr. Patel corrected. "But that's not the important part. The important part is how they react. To our creativity," he brought up a new chart showing response times. "When we use a tactic they've seen before, they counter it quickly. But when we try something completely new, something they've never encountered, their response time increases dramatically." Admiral Chang leaned forward. "How dramatically?" "At the Battle of New Moscow, We used a pincer movement they had never seen before. It took them 6 hours to respond effectively. 6 hours, Admiral. In that time, we inflicted more damage on their fleet than in any previous engagement. Why didn't we follow up on that success? General Torres asked. Because by the next battle, they had adapted. They were ready for pincer movements. But here's what I realized. They had adapted to that specific pincer movement. When we tried a different version at Tau Ceti, it worked again. Dr. Patel activated a three-dimensional display showing battle patterns over time. The Vorthok learned slowly but perfectly. They master whatever we show them, but they can't predict what we'll do next because we keep changing. You're saying their long lifespans make them slow to adapt? I'm saying their long lifespans make them think in patterns that assume enemies don't change quickly. They've conquered species that develop new tactics over centuries. We develop new tactics every few months. Admiral Chang stood and walked to the window overlooking the training grounds. Below, young pilots who had never known peace practiced maneuvers that had been invented last week. What are you proposing, Doctor? Stop trying to beat them with superior technology or firepower. We can't. Instead, we need to fight a war that changes so rapidly they can't keep up. How? Dr. Patel activated his final presentation. Accelerated. Tactical evolution. We form small, independent units led by our youngest, most creative commanders. Each unit develops its own fighting style. When the Vorthok adapt to one unit's tactics, that unit abandons those tactics and creates new ones. Want us to constantly change how we fight? I want us to never fight the same way twice. The Vorthok expect enemies who improve slowly over time. What if we improved rapidly and unpredictably? General Torres studied the proposal. This would require giving massive autonomy to junior officers. Lieutenants and captains would be making strategic decisions. Yes, sir. Officers young enough to think differently. Old enough to have combat experience, but young enough to ignore conventional wisdom. Admiral Chang turned from the window. The Vorthok have been fighting for thousands of years. They've perfected their methods through countless conflicts. Exactly, Admiral. They've perfected methods that work against enemies who think like they do. Long-term planners, patient strategists, species that refine tactics over generations. Dr. Patel paused. We're not that kind of enemy. We're short-lived and desperate, adaptive and unpredictable. Our weakness might be our strength. Admiral, Chang looked at the data one more time. How quickly could we implement this? I have 12 volunteer units ready to begin training tomorrow. Young commanders, veteran crews, experimental tactics. Give me 6 months, and I'll show you a kind of warfare the Vorthok have never seen. General Torres nodded slowly. The Vorthok think our short lives make us weak. Maybe it's time to show them that sometimes burning bright is better than burning forever. Admiral Chang activated her communicator. Get me the council president. I need authorization for a complete change in military doctrine. As the meeting ended, Dr. Patel looked once more at the tactical displays. Somewhere out in space, ancient alien minds were planning the next phase of a centuries-long conquest. They expected humanity to fight like every other species they had defeated. They were about to discover that humans had learned to turn their greatest weakness into their most dangerous weapon. The aliens had mastered patience. Now they would face an enemy that had mastered change itself. Commander Zethkar stood frozen in his command center as reports flooded in from across the war zone. In the past 6 months, something had gone terribly wrong with the human conquest. What should have been a simple, methodical campaign had turned into chaos. Sir, we've lost contact with the occupation force at New Helsinki, reported Subleader Vishthak. His voice carried a tone Zethkar had never heard before. Uncertainty. How? Zethkar demanded. We took that world 3 years ago. The human population surrendered. There was no resistance. The humans came back, sir, but not the same humans. Different ships, different tactics, different everything. The main display, Zethkar watched recordings from the battle. Human ships attacked in a formation he had never seen before. Instead of the careful, organized assaults the Vorthok expected, the humans moved like a swarm of insects. Ships darted in and out of formation, striking at random points, then disappearing before the Vorthok could respond. Analysis. Zethkar ordered. Strategic planner Morvis approached the display with the slow, careful movements that marked deep thought among his people. At 7,000 years old, he had seen every possible variation of space combat. But he stared at the human attack patterns with visible confusion. "These tactics make no sense," Morvis said finally. "They waste energy, expose their ships to unnecessary risk, and sacrifice coordinated firepower for speed. Yet they succeeded in retaking the world." "Yes, but at terrible cost. They lost 60% of their attacking force." Zethkar nodded. This was how short-lived species always fought, with desperate fury that burned bright and brief. "They cannot sustain such losses for long." "That's what I thought, sir. But look at this." Morvis activated another display showing human ship movements over the past month. "They've launched 17 separate attacks across our occupied territories. Each attack uses completely different tactics." Zethkar studied the data. At Proxima Station, humans had used coordinated bomber runs. At Wolf Sanctuary, they had employed stealth infiltration. At New Carthage, they had somehow convinced the local asteroid miners to help them build hidden weapons platforms. "They're learning," Vishtak observed. No, Morvis corrected. "Learning implies building on previous knowledge. These humans appear to be forgetting everything they knew and starting fresh each time." A new alarm sounded through the command center. Communications Officer Talvek turned from his station with alarm. "Sir, we're receiving reports from the 4th Fleet. They're under attack at Kepler Station." "Impossible. We just took Kepler Station 18 months ago." "There are no human forces in that sector, sir." "There are now." The tactical display switched to show the battle raging at Kepler Station. Zethkar watched in growing disbelief as human ships attacked from directions that should have been impossible. They had somehow approached through an asteroid field that previous intelligence had declared impassable. "How many ships?" he asked. "Unknown, sir. They keep changing formation. Our sensors read anywhere from 50 to 200 vessels." Zethkar had conquered 47 worlds in his long life, had faced desperate last stands, clever ambushes, and technological surprises. But he had never seen anything like this. The humans were fighting like creatures that had nothing to lose and everything to prove. "Hey, sir," Vishtak said quietly. "Perhaps we should consider accelerating our timeline. Bring in the full battle fleet and end this quickly." "That is not our way," Zethkar replied automatically. But even as he spoke, he wondered if their traditional methods were adequate against this strange enemy. Another communication arrived, this time from General Korthus himself. The ancient commander's image appeared on the main screen, his purple scales darker than Zethkar remembered.
"I report."
Korthus commanded. "Sir, the humans have become unpredictable. They're using tactics we've never encountered, attacking targets we didn't expect them to value, and replacing their losses faster than our projections indicated." "Faster? How much faster?" Zethkar consulted his data. "We estimated it would take them 5 years to rebuild their fleet after major losses. They've done it in 8 months. 8 months? Even Korthus seemed surprised. "Are you certain?" "Yes, sir. And the new fleet uses different ships with different capabilities. It's as if they completely redesigned their military in less than a year." Korthus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of 8,000 years of experience. "I fought the Caridian Empire. Their individuals lived for 800 years, and they took 50 years to make significant tactical adjustments. I conquered the Zephyrian Collective. They lived for 1,200 years and needed a century to adapt to new threats. The humans adapt in months, sir. Months." Korthus repeated the word as if it were a curse. "Show me their current disposition." Display changed to show human forces throughout the war zone. Instead of the organized territorial defense the Vorthok expected, human ships seemed to be everywhere at once. Small fleets hit targets seemingly at random, then vanished before reinforcements could arrive. "Where's their main fleet?" Korthus asked. "We're not sure, sir. They don't appear to have a main fleet anymore. They've broken into dozens of smaller groups. That's tactically insane." Small groups cannot stand against concentrated force. No, sir. But they're not standing. They're moving constantly, hitting us when we don't expect it, then running before we can respond. On the display, red dots marked recent human attacks. The pattern looked like a disease spreading through Vorthok territory. No single attack was devastating, but together they were wearing down the alien forces through constant harassment. Talvek interrupted, "We're receiving surrender demands from the humans." Both commanders turned to stare at the communications officer. "Surrender demands?" Zethkar repeated. "Yes, sir. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. They demand we withdraw from all human worlds within 30 days or face escalated military action." Korthus made a sound that might have been laughter. Escalated action. They're demanding our surrender after 18 months of minor raids. "Sir," Morvis said quietly, "perhaps these are not minor raids. Look at our casualty reports." Display showed Vorthok losses over the past 6 months. The numbers were higher than Zethkar had realized. It's not catastrophic, but significant. More importantly, the rate of loss was increasing as human attacks became more frequent and unpredictable. "They're not trying to defeat us in battle," Morvis continued. "They're trying to exhaust us through constant action. That strategy cannot work," Korthus said firmly. "We have more ships, better technology, and unlimited patience." "But do we have unlimited adaptability?" Morvis asked. "Every time we develop a counter to their tactics, they abandon those tactics and try something new. We spend months perfecting responses to attacks they used once and will never use again." Zethkar looked at the tactical display again. Dots of human attacks formed no pattern he could understand. It was as if the humans had decided to fight without any plan at all, changing their approach so rapidly that even they might not know what they would do next. Sir Vishtek said, "The Fourth Fleet is requesting permission to pursue the humans who attacked Kepler Station." "Granted," Zethkar replied automatically. "Sir, they don't know which direction the humans went." Zethkar stared at his subordinate. In 5,000 years of life, he had never heard those words in relation to space combat. Ships left traces. Fleets had destinations. Enemies had bases and supply lines and predictable needs. How can they not know? The humans scattered in 17 different directions, sir. Some ships went toward human space, others went toward empty systems, and some went toward our own supply bases. For the first time in his long life, Commander Zethkar began to understand fear. Not fear of death, which was a brief thing, but fear of the unknown. The humans were fighting a kind of war that violated everything the Vorthok understood about. Conflict. They were fighting like they had nothing to lose and no time to waste. And somehow it was working. General Korthus stood alone in his private chambers aboard the flagship of the Vorthok fleet. At 8,000 years old, he had never known defeat. He had conquered 43 worlds, crushed dozens of species, and brought the order of the Empire to countless civilizations. Today, for the first time in his ancient life, he was considering retreat. The reports covered his desk like fallen leaves. 3 years had passed since the humans began their strange new way of fighting. In that time, the Vorthok had lost more ships than in the previous century of conquest. Not to superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but to something the ancient commander could barely understand: chaos. A soft chime announced a visitor. Commander Zethkar entered, moving with the slow, tired steps of someone carrying a heavy burden. At 5,000 years old, he looked older than commanders twice. His age? "Report," Korthus said simply. "We've lost the 7th Fleet," Zethkar replied without ceremony, "ambushed at Vega Prime by forces that shouldn't have existed." Korthus closed his eyes. The 7th Fleet had been one of their strongest. How many ships? All of them, sir. 200 vessels destroyed or captured in a battle that lasted 6 hours. 6 hours? Against the entire 7th Fleet? The humans didn't fight them, sir. They surrounded them with ships hidden in the asteroid belt, then simply waited. When our ships tried to break out, the humans attacked from every direction at once. No formation, no coordination, just pure aggression from all sides. Korthus opened his eyes and stared at the tactical display on his wall. Red markers showed human attacks over the past month. They covered nearly half of what had once been secure Vorthok territory. The pattern looked like a disease spreading through the Empire's carefully planned conquest. Strategic analysis? He asked. Sir, there is no strategy to analyze. Kea, the humans appear to be fighting without any central plan. Local commanders make decisions independently. They attack when they see opportunity, retreat when they face overwhelming force, and regroup in places we never expect. That should make them easy to defeat, divide, and conquer. We've tried, sir. Every time we concentrate forces to crush one human group, 3 other groups attack our supply lines. When we spread out to protect our supplies, they mass together and hit our weakened positions. Korthus walked to the window overlooking the fleet. Hundreds of Vorthok warships hung in formation around the flagship, their dark hulls reflecting starlight like scales on some vast creature. It was a sight that had brought terror to species across the galaxy for 20,000 years. How many humans are we fighting? We estimate their total fleet at perhaps 5,000 ships, sir. We have 12,000 ships in this sector alone, yes, sir? But we can't bring them all to bear against an enemy that refuses to stay in one place long enough for a proper battle. The door chimed again. Strategic planner Morvis entered, his ancient form moving with visible exhaustion. At 7,000 years old, he had spent the last 3 years trying to understand human tactics. The effort had aged him more than the previous 1,000 years of careful warfare. Sir Morvis said, I've completed my analysis of human behavior patterns, and they're not following any pattern we understand. But I think I know why. Morvis activated a holographic display showing the progression of the war. Look at this timeline of human tactical evolution. The display showed human tactics, changing every few months. Ship designs altered constantly. Command structures shifted weekly. Attack patterns never repeated exactly. They're not learning from experience the way we do, Morvis continued. We perfect our methods over centuries. We refine tactics until they become flawless. But the humans abandon working tactics just to try something new. That's wasteful and illogical. Yes, sir. But it's also impossible to counter. Every time we develop a response to their tactics, they've already moved on to something else. Korthus studied the display. What are you saying? I'm saying there. Short lifespans aren't a weakness in warfare. They're an advantage. They don't have time to perfect tactics, so they keep changing them. Don't live long enough to become attached to any particular way of fighting. Zethkar stepped forward. Sir, I've been studying their command structure. Their fleet commanders are replaced every few years, not because they fail, but because they promote them or give them new assignments. They never develop the deep expertise we value. But they also never develop the rigid thinking we suffer from, Morvis added. A human commander with 2 years of experience thinks differently than one with 20 years. They keep promoting young officers who haven't learned that certain tactics are impossible. Korthus felt something he had not experienced in millennia. Confusion. Are you telling me that inexperience is better than wisdom? In this kind of war, perhaps. Their inexperienced commanders try things that experienced ones would know are foolish. Sometimes those foolish tactics work precisely because we don't expect them. A communication alert interrupted their discussion. The face of Admiral Chang appeared on the main screen. Human looked tired but determined. Behind her, Korthus could see the bustling activity of a human command center. General Korthus, Admiral Chang said, I'm broadcasting this message to your entire fleet. It's time to end this war. You wish to surrender? Korthus asked. I'm offering you the chance to surrender. You have 48 hours to begin withdrawing from all human systems. If you refuse, we will escalate our operations. Korthus almost laughed.
Escalate.
You have 5,000 ships against our 12,000. You cannot threaten us. Numbers don't matter anymore, General. You should have learned that by now. Your ships are powerful, but they're predictable. Your commanders are experienced, but they're inflexible. Your tactics are perfect, but they're old. And yours are chaotic and wasteful. Yes, Admiral Chang agreed, and that's why we're winning. The transmission ended. Korthus stared at the blank screen, trying to process what he had just heard. Around him, his advisors waited in silence. Sir Zethkar said quietly, She might be right. We're not winning anymore. We're not even holding our own. We have superior technology, larger fleets, and thousands of years of experience. But they have something we don't, Morvis said. They have urgency. Every human who fights knows their life is short. They can't afford to waste time on careful planning and perfect execution. They have to act, and act now. Korthus returned to his desk and looked at the reports again. Casualty figures, supply shortages, morale problems. For 3 years, the humans had been teaching the Vorthok a lesson they had never needed to learn. Before, sometimes patience was not a virtue. "What do you recommend?" he asked finally. Zethkar and Morvis exchanged glances. "Withdrawal, sir," Zethkar said. "Not surrender. Strategic withdrawal to regroup and develop new approaches. We retreat. We acknowledge that our current methods are not working against this particular enemy. The humans fight a kind of war we've never encountered. Maybe we need to learn from them." Korthus closed his eyes again. In 8,000 years of life, he had never imagined saying these words. "Prepare orders for general withdrawal from human space." "Sir." Zethkar seemed surprised that the order had actually been given. "We came here expecting to fight a species that would exhaust itself in a few decades of futile resistance. Instead, we found an enemy that treats each day as if it were their last. They fight with the fury of the dying, but they never actually die out. They just keep replacing themselves with new fighters who are just as desperate and creative as the ones before." Morvis nodded slowly. "Their mortality makes them dangerous in a way we never anticipated." "Send the withdrawal orders," Korthus commanded, "and send a message to the High Council. Tell them we have encountered something new in this galaxy, a species whose weakness is their strength." Yes. As his subordinates left to carry out the orders, Korthus remained alone with his thoughts. For 20,000 years, the Vorthok had conquered through patience and superior planning. They had outlasted every enemy they had ever faced, but humanity had taught them that. Sometimes the race did not go to the swift, nor the battle to the strong. Sometimes it went to those who burned brightest in their brief time under the stars. The humans had won not because they were stronger or smarter or better equipped. They had won because they understood something the ancient Vorthok had forgotten, that time was precious precisely because it was limited, and in the end, that understanding had made all the difference.